Hey guys, so finally getting to the Eternals Easter eggs. Whoo, there is a lot. My gosh. Okay, so I believe I did a review on here maybe a day or two, a few days after I actually saw it. It was the first time I went back to the theaters to see a movie. Totally worth it. But now that it is officially on Disney Plus, I've been meaning to get to the Easter eggs for you guys. There's a ton of information. The timeline, my gosh, because we need to talk about it. Um, so here are the Easter eggs and the references. It's going to be really important because if you don't read the comics, well, there's a lot of things you're missing. So highly advise you read the comics. If you're interested in that, there is what's called Marvel Unlimited. It is a subscription-based service. Um, it is $10 a month. No, this is not an advertisement. I'm just letting you guys know. But you will have access to all of the comics. I will also be having a list of each comic book per movie. That will be quickly uploaded to my website in February, March, so you guys can check that out to correspond with which movie. So you're not like behind if you are into the comic books. And maybe you don't want Marvel Unlimited, which is fine. Anyway, let's get to those Easter eggs and those references because my gosh, there is so much to get through. Okay, so the beginning of the film starts off with the story and the creation of the Celestials, explaining that they came to Earth to fight the Deviants. You guys can pause to read those. And it starts off with 5000 BC Mesopotamia. And this is important because throughout the film, they are going back and forth throughout history, kind of showing where the Eternals were living and fighting at the time. They've lived since then on Earth from 5000 BC all the way to modern day, aka 2021 or 2022 at this point. And that's important to know because there's different parts in history where they explain that the point of the Eternals being on Earth is not to intervene in history, but only to protect them from the deviant creatures. And this will come up later, but this is why when I talked about the theory, where the question was asked about why didn't they intervene with Thanos? Well, that was the answer, right? I showed you the clip. You can go see the theory. But that's why there's a lot of different Easter eggs because they've lived that long. So also mentioned in my theory video was that the Eternals likely created the 10 rings that were used in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, as you can see from this picture. The movie then skips forward, and now we're with Cersei. She takes a photo of this artifact. She is working as a professor, and there are obviously a lot of Easter eggs within this, like Socrates and oh man, I can't think of his name. Dane Whitman, who ends up being the Black Knight. If you follow the comics, I'm not trying to give anything away, but it is mentioned at the very end. That's a big one, but there's other artifacts and like pictures that you can see within the classroom that Cersei and Dane are originally in. And I would say when you're watching it, just pause to check them out if you can. Anyway, moving on. Later in that night, Dane Whitman, who is dating Cersei, she gives him the Black Knight ring, and he was confused on like, how did you get this? And she was like, I'm just a good eBay bidder, which could be very much true. But you have to remember she has also lived throughout that time, so she not only has a lot of connections, she has a lot of artifacts that she should probably not have otherwise, you know. Anywho, so that's important, but she's kind of letting it be known who she is, and he's just not registering it at this time. However, they then are walking home with Sprite, who is a fellow Celestial, aka Eternal, and Sprite looks very young. Sprite looks like a teenager. This is important because this bothers Sprite so much, right? And the deviant comes and fights them, and this is when it clicks into Dane Whitman's head like, oh my god, you were telling the truth the whole time. And that's when he starts asking questions about, you know, throughout time and the Avengers. And there's a little bit more information that comes up later on when Ajak is speaking with, I can't think of his name. Oh god. The boy who flew too close to the sun. Anyway, so it does come up more about the Thanos thing in that scene, but we'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, back to the Sprite thing. So they are now in Cersei's apartment. You can see how young Sprite is. But if you see what Sprite is looking at, there are a bunch of artifacts throughout time that, again, unless you're like a very rich collector, you would likely not have access to. So these are important pieces in history. The film then flashes back to like more of the creation of the Celestials, the Eternals, right? And they're what they're supposed to be doing. They are then transported to Babylon when the deviants start attacking. So we get to see more of different pieces in history that we know are a part of our actual history. So I mean real life, IRL, you know, you've heard of Babylon, you've heard of the Garden of Babylon, I'm sure. And this film really does a good job of expressing how these civilizations likely looked at the time. I mean, maybe there's a bit more fiction in there than not, but I think they did a really good job with their research, and they probably, and I'm going to say this because I know how Disney and Pixar and Marvel work, they likely hired historians and really took the time to kind of like animate everything that they knew and do their research. They're not just throwing together a random thing that they may think looks like it. Marvel, like especially Marvel is one of the big names, especially for live action, right? They're not just going to throw it together and be like, oh, we're just saying this is Babylon, but it's not. They probably did a lot of research and had a lot of people. I mean, you guys can look it up in the credits. So I'm not just throwing it out there. I'm just saying this is something that Marvel and Disney and Pixar are very known to do. Anyway, moving on, we learn a little bit more about each character, like Festus, Druig. Here's Sprite. It's a very bad picture. And kind of what their powers are and how they contributed to society. Now, what I love about Sprite in this instance is she's very much a storyteller. And this is important because it comes into play not only in that particular scene, but if you think back to the names that are associated in this movie by the Eternals, right? Their names: Cersei's, Ajak, Sprite, Gilgamesh, Thena, and there's more, right? I'm not even giving you half of them. Can you picture a time in history where you learned something about one of these names? Right? So, like, Thena is known as Athena in Greece, right? She was known as the Greek, goddess of, I believe, war, it was, right? Or, was it Ishtak? I think that's his name. The Boy Who Flew Close to the Sun, that was something that Sprite came up with. Gilgamesh, the story of Gilgamesh, right? So this is not just something where their names came out of nowhere, right? They had a part in history, even though they're not technically supposed to. And I put that in quotes, supposed to, right? So they didn't intervene, but they also are very well known in pieces of history. I hope that makes sense to you, but like if you do more research about the different names, you'll understand. Like Festus, right? He is known for creating these things. Well, that happened in Greece. Festus was the god that was kicked out of Olympus, which is mentioned in the movie. That Olympus wasn't real, right? They were supposed to go to Olympia, and Olympia wasn't actually real according to the Celestials. I'm giving everything away, and I'm hoping that if you're watching this, I'm sorry if you have not seen Eternals, but you'll understand. But they're hoping to go back to Olympia, but then they find out Olympia doesn't exist, right? So that's something that is brought up, and so when I say Hephaestus, in the Greek story, Hephaestus was a Greek god who got kicked off Olympia, and he was down, I believe he was in the pits, not exactly like in what would be considered underground or hell, but he had his own working shop, and he was still known for creating these devices and these weapons, and that's what he's known for in our mythology on Earth, like in real life, right? But Marvel takes it and uses that knowledge and kind of spins it a bit for the comics and the MCU, which is fascinating. Like, you got to remember this is so good. So good. Anyway, we're moving on to more Easter eggs. Anyway, they show more pieces in history like the Gupta Empire, the Tenochtitlan, and how the world is forming when it comes to civilization. It then fast forward to modern day when they find that Ajax is killed. And Cersei then takes over as leader as the Eternals because Ajax wanted her to, and she meets the main Celestial, and she's given this information, and they're like, what the heck is going on? We need to find everyone. So that's what they go and do. There's a bunch of Easter eggs. I'm not going to dive into all of them. I'll let you guys pause. But when they go back to their main ship, if you pause it, you will see all these different bits and pieces of history, which is kind of cool, but also like they were telling, I can't think of her name. They're like, well, why do you have this and that? Like, you were supposed to just be on the ship. And she's taken bits and pieces of history and like stored it, right? This is their history too. They've lived through all of this. Anyway, they continue on, and they find out that Ishtak killed Ajax and really started this whole thing. They have to fight the Deviants at the same time. And the half the Eternals want to stop the Celestials from destroying Earth, and half of them want that to continue, right? So it's a power struggle, and so there's a whole fight that happens, the one of the end scenes. But it's really, really important to understand what's going on with the power struggle. It's not just an internal issue, it's an external issue. I mean, the whole plot was all over the place, but at the same time, very well organized. And I say all over the place as in like they're going back into different pieces of history. So while Eternals mainly takes place in 2021, 2022, it also shows and explains bits and pieces of history, which is important for their existence and how other things came to be. There's also mentions of like Steve Rogers and of Falcon and of Iron Man. So they're very well of the Avengers, and they um at one point, I can't think of his name. The Kershnik, I think his name, whatever his name was, he was a friend of Rogers, and then like something happened, and they're no longer friends. So that is something that is kind of mentioned in the movies. Anyway, the movie ends with Cersei being taken by the Celestial. Dane Whitman is like, what the heck just happened? It flashes to the other Eternals on the starship, and Star Fox appears, aka Harry Styles. Now, this was a big surprise. This is kind of like, oh my god, is this linking to Fantastic Four or X-Men? This could be something that really comes about. But then, so that was the after credits. There's an after credits. I know that's not something that usually happens, but this part is really where it shows more about Dane Whitman, who is the Black Knight. And this shows I don't even know exactly what it is. It looks like a sword of some sort. But he basically opens the box and begins to become the Black Knight without showing all of that. So my theory is in the next 5 years, we don't know for 2022 or 2023, but we do know there will be a second movie. Like this will continue. It says to be continued. So probably within the next 5 years, likely 2024 or later, we will see more of this storyline. I think it'll take longer. I think it'll be later rather than sooner because they have a lot of projects and they tend to link into other things. But obviously, Marvel does a great job. They want you to continue watching. There are tons of other Easter eggs. I highly advise you go watch it. Um, and let me know what you guys think down below. So, what are your thoughts and opinions? First of all, I want to know down below in the comments, did you guys genuinely enjoy this movie? Because I know I did. My biggest mistake was bringing my 8-year-old, he was 8 at the time, um, who normally was fine with Marvel movies, but now I don't know, he does not like violence, so we'll not be doing that again anytime soon with a Marvel movie. If he wants to watch it, he can watch it at home. But yeah, I mean, I still loved it. I still got to enjoy it. Definitely a movie that I will watch over and over again. I truly enjoyed each and every single character in their own. And I felt that they all stood out beautifully. It's hard to describe, but you guys can check out my review video because I do a better job. Um, anyway, I hope to see you guys very soon. Remember, there is February and March of this year. I will be covering strictly Marvel movies. So if you have any other movies, Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, whatever it may be, if you want me to cover those, I'm happy to. I will begin up on those movies in like April. So comment down below what movies you want me to cover because I have a list. But if it's not on there, or if it is on there, I can, prioritize a little bit. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I will see you guys very, very soon.